Good afternoon. Just want to welcome you today to our last webinar for Watt, Kansas this year. And we're going to be exploring today the blue zones and the keys to living longer and better. And I'm just kind of curious if you have heard of the blue zones, if you would say yes or no in the chat. Kind of gives me an idea if we have some people here who are familiar with them. So go ahead and just say if you're familiar with the blue zones. Okay, good. Not until you read the newsletter. And another person is wonderful. So yeah, just go ahead and put in chat if you're familiar with the blue zones. I think it's fascinating research. And I'm Sharolyn Jackson, the Northeast Region Extension Specialist for Family Consumer Sciences, and also a program leader coordinator for Extension Family Consumer Sciences, and I lead the Watt, Kansas program. And it's always been an interest of mine as far as focusing in on how to prevent chronic disease. And I think the Blue Zones research really applies to that very specifically. I was really fortunate to be able to visit one of the Blue Zones in 2019. I went with a group from some colleagues from Kansas that you see here. And as you can tell, we were promoting Watt, Kansas when we were at Ikaria, and then also a team from Kentucky. And so we combined and were able to spend some time in Ikaria, really immersed there to see what their lifestyle is like, what they eat, how they live, and then also interviews with people talking about their perspectives. So we talked to a number of centenarians and what it is that keeps them going and how they've been able to live a very long and healthy and productive life. And so we're pictured here on the far left is Erin Martinez. She's our adult development and aging specialist. Christine McFeeder, who was an agent in Meade County, Nancy Honig, also from Southwest Kansas, and Joellen Argabright, who was in Northwest Kansas. And so if there's any familiar faces there, that was the team from Kansas that was able to go to Ikaria. We know from research that about 20 to 30% of our longevity is determined by our genes, and that environment and lifestyle make up the rest. So when you think about that, we really have a lot of influence over our health, our longevity. 70 to 80% of that is due to our lifestyle habits, our environment, and so forth. And so we have some control over our own health. A blue zone is a non-scientific term that's given to geographic regions that are home to some of the world's oldest people. And they're called blue zones simply because when Dan Buettner and his colleagues were searching for these areas, these hotspots of aging in the world, they would draw a blue circle around them on a map. So there's really nothing scientific at all about the term blue zone. It's just what they were using to identify these communities, and it just kind of stuck. Dan Buettner is the Blue Zone's founder. He's an explorer, a National Geographic Fellow, an award-winning journalist and producer, and a New York Times best-selling author. And so there's a lot more research on this topic revealing many of the same findings. However, they're not reported as Blue Zones research, and this is a trademarked name. But there's a lot of other research that's going on by others and really finding some of the very same things that Dan Buettner discovered. I think he just presents it to us in a way that's relatable and motivating. So let's take a look at what some of these blue zone communities are, where they are, some characteristics about them. The first one we'll talk about is Sardinia, Italy. It's home to the greatest concentration of male centenarians in the world. And you'll discover, excuse me, go back, there we go. You'll discover lifestyles, a pretty traditional lifestyle. It's not changed much since the time of Christ. Residents in this area are also culturally isolated. They've kept to a very traditional, healthy lifestyle. They still hunt, fish, harvest the food they eat. They remain close with their friends and family throughout their lives, and they laugh and drink wine together. The next one we'll talk about is Okinawa, Japan. It's perhaps their greatest secret is a strong dedication to friends and family. They maintain a powerful social network that's called a moai. It's a lifelong circle of friends that support people well into old age. Okinawans also have a strong sense of purpose in their life. It's a driving force that the Japanese call ikigai. We're going to talk more about all of these characteristics too in a little bit. The Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica. This Caribbean nation is economically secure and has excellent health care. But other factors are at play here, especially in Nicoya, which is an 80-mile peninsula just south of the Nicaraguan border. One is what they call the plan de vida, or a reason to live, which propels a positive outlook among the elders and helps keep them active. Another is a focus on their family and a special ability to listen and laugh. Nicoyan centenarians frequently visit with neighbors. They tend to live with families and children or grandchildren who provide support, as well as having a sense of purpose. Loma Linda, California is the only American Blue Zone. Here you'll encounter a community of Adventists teaching us new lessons about the power of faith, friendship, and fruit. They live as much as a decade longer than the rest of us in the United States, and much of their longevity can be attributed to vegetarianism, and regular exercise. Plus, the Adventists don't smoke or drink alcohol. So it's really, the Blue Zone is just this isolated group of the Adventists, not all of Loma Linda. And then Ikaria, Greece, which is the island that I was fortunate enough to visit. It's home to residents who live 8 years longer than Americans. They have half the rate of heart disease and almost no dementia. Here, 1 in 3 make it to their 90s. A combination of factors can help explain this, including the geography. Ikaria is very hilly. They do a lot of walking, a lot of climbing because they're hiking. So the geography plays a role, their culture, their diet, their lifestyle, and outlook. They enjoy strong red wine, late night domino games, and a relaxed pace of life that ignores clocks. They enjoy clean air, warm breezes, and rugged terrain, which draws them outdoors into an active lifestyle. So perhaps you're starting to see some common themes here, and that's what we're going to be discussing in just the next few minutes. Ultimately, Dan and his team of demographers and researchers found that all of the Blue Zones areas shared 9 specific lifestyle habits. We call these the Power 9. And the Blue Zones areas of the world share and benefit from these, and these practices together increase longevity, health, and happiness. And this research has shown that the set of behaviors and outlooks benefit people in these ways. They live longer, healthier lives. So it's not just longevity for the sake of a number, but vitality. Their engagement with family, friends, and daily routines continues well into their 90s and beyond. They have lower rates of chronic diseases like Alzheimer's, cancer, depression, and dementia. They have quality relationships, and that's part of the key to a life in alignment with the Blue Zone's habits is active engagement with community and friends and family. These relationships work in a virtuous cycle of happiness and health. They spend quality time with others. It's not just enjoyable in the moment, but contributes to their overall health and that of the others that are in their circle. And so it's adding life to their years while adding years to their life. So all of the Power 9 components can help you build a longer and a better life. Life satisfaction increases when you have a purpose and are engaged in a spiritual practice of some sort. Both of these are important to your quality of life and how you demonstrate outwardly your health and well-being. And so now we're going to take a look at each one of the Power 9 and talk a little bit more about it. Well, people in the blue zones do experience stress. They're not living stress-free, but they don't have the chronic inflammation that's associated with every major age-related disease. What the world's longest lived people have that we don't are routines to shed that stress. The Okinawans take a few moments each day to remember their ancestors. The Adventists pray, and the Icarians take a nap, and the Sardinians do happy hour. So they find some way to manage their stress and how to shed that stress. Although Icaria and many communities in Kansas share a rural commonality, the pace that's undertaken by the residents in those places is notably different. The Icarians do not embrace hustle or bustle or a remote sense of urgency in most any sense. Their definition of time or planning is very loosely based. For example, when we were in Icaria, we had invited a speaker to debrief our tour group at 6 o'clock that evening. That might result in the conversation happening around 8 or 8:30 or some point, even the following day. They're very just laid back. It's a very laid back culture, and that's a key to their ability to downshift. And I think that would be really hard for us to adjust to, because we tend to really focus on schedules and try to pack a lot into our day. The key to stress relief is finding something that works for you. This can and it should be different for everyone. Some people may find walking, gardening, or yoga as stress relievers. So make a point to focus on practices that provide calm, and downshifting is one of the Power 9. They also move naturally. The world's longest lived people, they don't pump iron, they don't run marathons or join gyms. They don't even have gyms in their communities in most cases. Instead, they live in environments that constantly nudge them into moving without thinking about it. They grow gardens, and they don't have mechanical conveniences for house and for yard work. This is the Icaria of the terrain of Icaria. And what farming looks like there. In that, you'll see particularly that middle photo shows you lots of terraces, and what their farmland looks much different than ours. In America, we have worked very hard to engineer physical activity out of our environment, and I think a good example of that is in the farming area. I don't know if you can think of other examples. If you do, put them in chat. But some things that come to my mind is we have machines that can do our laundry and bake our bread, things that used to be just done exclusively by hand. And if you can think of any others where we have engineered physical activity out of our work, just pop them in the chat. Another thing that's a big one for me is this. I sit behind a computer most of my day now, and I used to be much more active doing things. So we have to be more intentional about getting that physical activity. We do a lot of our meetings, a lot of our educational delivery by Zoom. And so that really ties you down to a computer and a desk, and doesn't give you that opportunity to be out getting some activity, but also those social connections. So yes, technology is wonderful, but there's a downside too. But think about how physically active is your work. And if you're on the 8th floor of a hotel, for example, or of an office building, and you need to get to the 10th floor, how would you get there? Would you take the elevator, or would you take the stairs? What's just natural to you? What's just something that you do without thinking? And that's where we can train ourselves to take different cues mentally to maybe walk the stairs instead of taking the elevator. Do you play a sport, or do you have an active hobby? And if you do you engage in that very often? And if you need to pick up something at the store that's a half a mile away, how would you get there? Would you hop in your car and drive? Probably most of us would. Or would you walk or ride a bicycle? So just think about some of those things a little bit. In many of the Blue Zones cultures, walking is their mode of transportation. Now, I know these communities are very different from ours, but I believe we can think of ways that we can move more and move naturally every day. Some things that I've done in my work in my office is moving the trash can away from your desk. So when you want to throw something away, you have to get up and walk to the trash can. You can move your printer to another location, so you have to walk to it. You can stand up at least every 30 minutes during your day. And maybe you can add some things to this list, but I was at a conference not too long ago, and granted, it was called the Active Living Conference, but every time we applauded, like a speaker was introduced or at the end of a presentation, anytime you would applaud, you would stand up. So it was a really easy cue to get you up, at least out of your seat for a little bit, and to do that regularly. Another one is to focus on a plant slant, your diet. And in the Blue Zones communities, they eat mostly a plant-based diet, not exclusively, but they do eat a lot of plants. They include a lot of beans, like fava, black beans, soybeans, and lentils are the cornerstone of most of the centenarian diets. Meat, mostly pork, is eaten an average only 5 times per month, and serving sizes are about 3 to 4 ounces, about the size of a deck of cards. So in comparison, they're eating a lot more plants and a lot less meat than we generally do. The Blue Zones communities follow the basic characteristics of a Mediterranean style of eating. Lots of fruits and vegetables, lots of beans and legumes, nuts, olive oil, fewer sweets, and very little added sugars. And so in the last newsletter, you were introduced to a resource that's called Med Instead of Meds. And it's just medinsteadofmeds.com. This is an excellent resource developed by North Carolina State University Extension. And so it really illustrates the Mediterranean eating style. And I think sometimes we think of the cultural implications or the flavors, but you can eat the Med way with any kind of culture influence that you prefer. It could be a Mexican food, or it could be American foods, but you could still follow that basic Mediterranean style of eating. So what does it mean to eat the Med way? And I really like this website because it makes eating the Med way very understandable. Lots of good resources there. These are some of the characteristics. So first of all, you swap your fats. You have mostly olive and canola oil, almost no saturated fat, very little saturated fat, almost no trans fats. And so again, choosing the healthy fats. They eat more vegetables and these are the main dish in some cases. Meat can be used just as a way to enhance the flavor. Eat more fruit and enjoy that as a dessert, and get at least 5 servings of fruits and vegetables per day. And in these Blue Zones communities, they're getting more than that. Snack on nuts and seeds, 3 ounces of nuts and seeds per week, but these are not the candied or honey roasted type. These are just basic nuts and seeds. And then making your grains whole as much as possible. So eating oatmeal, quinoa, brown rice, popcorn. Look for the word whole as the first ingredient on that ingredient label. Another characteristic is they eat seafood at least 3 times per week on the average. And so they're eating a lot more seafood than we do. And then they also, like, to eat the Med way would really involve rethinking your sweets. They just don't have the kind of sweet offerings that we do here in terms of desserts. They don't have pastries, that are so easily available. They have desserts, but they're not as sweet when you into the taste, and they're not as plentiful. They oftentimes enjoy fruit as a dessert. These are some of the foods that we enjoyed in Ikaria. And so if you look at, there's a couple of dishes here that showed chickpeas. That was a very common dish. On the bottom in the middle is a chickpea dish, an Icarian style chickpeas. And that is one that I do make and enjoy. And that's a picture of it there. And it makes a lot. It's very economical. It's tasty. And the picture on the right is what would be kind of a typical meal there, just some variety, but just small amounts of the chickpeas, and there's a Greek salad with some fresh feta cheese, lots of vegetables. So they're both fresh and cooked. And so they also have the Icarian bread that's very popular there, and they bake all their own bread. You really don't find all the kind of convenience food that we have here in the United States. That's a really big difference among these countries, which leads really well into this next slide. This is a gas station in Ikaria. So think about it, and then think about what is a gas station that we have here in the United States. And most of them are a convenience store, right? And so this is just simply gas. There's nothing else there. You can't get a soda. You can't get a candy bar or some chips. You can't pick up whatever household item that you didn't remember to bring on your trip. They're just a gas station. And so there's not that temptation or that prompt to grab a snack or a sugary beverage whenever you fill up with gas. But that was something that really struck me. It was that's all it is a gas station. Very little. There is some influence there with, like, you could get a bottled soda, but you didn't see fast food restaurants. You didn't see the kind of convenience that we have here in the United States. Another characteristic is the 80% rule. So in Okinawa, they say hara hachi bu, and it's a 2,500-year-old Confucian mantra that's said before meals, and it reminds them to stop eating when their stomachs are 80% full. So I think that's something that, again, we tend to not stop eating until we are pretty full or even over full. But this 20% gap between not being hungry and feeling full could be the difference between losing weight or gaining it. People in the blue zones eat their smallest meal in the late afternoon or the early evening, and then they don't eat any more the rest of the day. And we tend to have a pretty heavy meal in the evening. That's sort of for a lot of people. For some, I know growing up on a farm, we had our big meal at noon, but then we'd have a kind of a heavy snack late afternoon, and then we'd eat a lighter meal later in the evening. And so kind of spacing that out, but our largest meal was usually at noon. Another way to think about this 80% rule is just something that a friend of mine explained, calling it the enjoyment curve. So when you're eating and you're really enjoying your food, it tastes good, and you're maybe eating it fast at times, like we sometimes do. And if you're eating so fast, your stomach can't signal to your brain that it's full, that you're satisfied. And so when you're enjoying that food and eating it, it tastes good. That's that enjoyment curve. When you eat too fast, you don't let it signal your brain you've gone past the enjoyment curve, and it's a place where you no longer enjoy the food as much because you're too full. So that's another way to think about this 80% rule, or to just eat slowly and listen to the cues that your body gives you. I'm just checking chat and someone asked, can you share the chickpea recipe? Yes, I can. It was actually in a Watt, Kansas newsletter. It should be on the website from the year 2020. And it should be in one of those newsletters there. If you just go to the website and then to the newsletter box on the bottom of wattkansas.org, and then go to 2020 and you'll see a list of the newsletters and their topics, and you'll find the chickpeas recipe there. Another one that they observe in many of these Blue Zones communities is called wine at 5. And so the research shows you definitely can enjoy and consume some alcohol and live to be happy 100. But the thing that's different is that they're not drinking as much again as what people often do in the US. So 1 drink daily for women, and 2 for men. And that's really the limit for the alcohol consumption. When we were in Ikaria, our host who organized a lot of our activities, and she was born in Ikaria and moved to the United States and lived here for about 10 to 15 years and then moved back to Ikaria. And it was interesting to hear her perspective because she talked a lot about the fact that, in the United States and in America, we just overdo things. We eat more than we really need. We drink more than we should. And that tends to be something that is a characteristic she noticed. So the real point here is that you can enjoy some alcohol, but very much in moderation. Along with that, I'm also going to say that the research is evolving on this particular topic. There's some that think and feel that, and some of the studies showing that to really limit that alcohol consumption. And certainly if you don't drink alcohol now, don't start thinking that you're going to get some really great health benefit from it. And so this is one that we share with a very cautionary statement to go along with it, in that just to continue to watch the research. And wine in particular is very much a part of the Mediterranean lifestyle and eating style. And so, that's what they've studied. And of course, people are enjoying having a glass of wine, usually red wine. But there's some things that go with it. They often have that as a way to socialize with friends. And so it's hard to isolate out, is the wine giving a lot of benefit, or are these other things giving the benefit here? Successful centenarians in the Blue Zones put their families first. And this means keeping your aging parents and grandparents nearby or in the home. It lowers the disease and mortality rates of the children in the home as well. In these communities, they commit to a life partner, which can add up to 3 years of life expectancy. They invest in their children with time and love. And they believe that if they do this, that the children will be more likely to care for them when the time comes and they're older. They gather together at a family meal as a way to build a family support system. Again, here, look at our lifestyles. Family meals are not, sometimes we have to make an effort to be able to sit down as a family and eat together. In the areas with this increased longevity, mealtime is a time for family and friends. It's a time to get a report of their family's day, to make plans for the next day, and then to eat slowly while they talk with those around them. And so it's as much about the conversation as it is about the food. So they they're very affectionate. They enjoy sitting closely together to be able to talk and to share and to laugh. They enjoy their small tables and homes, as it enables family and friends to gather closely and to not isolate themselves off in another room or a part of the house. Again, a big contrast to a lot of what's going on in our country. They put family and loved ones first by spending this quality time with them. Is one of the many things that add up to their greater longevity. Another one is they identify a right tribe. So research shows that our social connections can impact our health as much as other factors. Successful centenarians are often born into social circles that promote healthy lifestyle behaviors. They cultivate close friends and strong social networks. These are a key component to successful aging. And one of the best examples of this is in Okinawa, Japan, where they have a strong dedication to family and friends. And they maintain this powerful social network, which is called a moai. It's a lifetime circle of friends, and it supports each other well into their old age. They also have a strong sense of belonging and are involved in some type of a faith-based community. A denomination doesn't seem to matter. Research shows that attending a faith-based service of some sort or gathering together for this purpose of strengthening faith up to 4 times per month can add 4 to 14 years of life expectancy. So that's pretty huge. And I think about my own faith community here in Manhattan, and one of our church members made the comment, he said, why are we here on this earth if it isn't to take care of each other? And so that's really kind of the premise of at least our faith-based community. And I think many of these too is about taking care of each other, checking in with each other. Again, that social connection along with the faith-based component. This is the one that stuck out in my experience in Ikaria and in learning about the blue zones, that it may be the most powerful. And I think it really is what helps keep them going in those later years of life. The Okinawans call it ikigai, and the Nicoyans call it plan de vida. And both of these translate to why I wake up in the morning. Knowing your sense of purpose is worth up to 7 years of extra life expectancy. And research shows that people who understand their value, this why they get up in the morning, lead longer and healthier lives. The purpose driver in their lives is not typically complex or out of the ordinary, but it's rather just living to love and support family. And this is a lady that we were fortunate enough to be able to visit in Ikaria. You can see her there on the far right. And her purpose, she says, she's a centenarian. She gets up every day to fix some of her special Greek dishes, or like there's a spinach pie that she makes. She makes a lot, but she wants to feed the family and friends that come in to check on her every day. So someone's checking on her and she's giving something to them in return. And that really keeps her going. And she was delightful. She talked about, all the things that she does to lead a very healthy life as a centenarian. So these are the Power 9 as identified by Dan Buettner's research. And in one of his books, he just gave some very basic advice. He says, eat your vegetables, have a positive outlook, and be kind to people and smile. That's really a pretty simple message. That's something we can all do, and very much at the cornerstone of those who live a very long and healthy and fulfilling life. The Blue Zones project is now all this research that's been done in these Blue Zones communities. Now they're trying to apply that in some communities here in the United States that are trying to somewhat shift their lifestyle to focus in on at least some of these Power 9. And those Blue Zones project communities are in Minnesota and California, Oregon, Florida, Iowa, Hawaii, and Texas. And so, it takes a long time to see what kind of change and what kind of outcomes will happen from this work. And so I'm looking forward to learning, what kinds of changes are there in terms of, health and other factors that they can look at and study. And so learning about the blue zones, and just this is really kind of an introduction. There are a number of books out about the blue zones. There are some that focus in just on the eating style. And there are some that really focus in more just on purpose and social connections. So if you want to learn more, those books are available. But is there anything that has stood out to you as we've talked about the Power Nine? Is there anything that's resonated with you and that's nudging you to take a step toward incorporating one of these Power Nine more into your lifestyle? So I'd like you to think about that for just a moment and put that in chat. I'll also be opening it up to questions here. If you'd like to have any questions, I'm going to stop sharing. And so does anybody have questions, or is there something that stood out to you that you so maybe surprised you, or is there something that you think I'm going to really incorporate that into my lifestyle going forward? You can respond either in the chat or in the Q&A section. Somebody mentioned they have a couple of Dan Buettner's books. That's great. And there's information on the web too that you can get from the Blue Zones website if you don't want to sit down with a book. Somebody else mentioned I'm interested in looking up some of the med recipes and trying them. One of the things that I haven't really focused on a lot this year in Watt, Kansas, but again, you can go back to the newsletters from the previous 5 years or on the website, and you can go back and look at newsletters from those. And I think it was maybe around 2020, oh goodness, 21, 22, we focused on healthy body and healthy mind. And another eating style that's very, very has really strong backing from research is the DASH diet, dietary approaches to stop hypertension. And another researcher has combined some of the DASH diet and the Mediterranean diet, and they call it the MIND diet. So it's basically eating a couple of things that are different about it is really focusing in on the dark leafy greens, having those daily, and then eating more berries, in particular blueberries, because those really support brain health. So there's some other interesting information out there. So if you're interested in looking at what's the kind of dietary pattern that you can follow, I would suggest the Mediterranean diet, the DASH diet, or looking into the MIND diet. So we have some people here. Debbie says she's going to slow down, enjoy life. That's wonderful. Another, love the life of the Blue Zones. And yes, I agree. We all need to incorporate it more into your life. And the med instead of med recipes. And there's really good information there on, and this is going to be a link in the next newsletter on choosing fats, healthy fats. There's information there on seafood, how to choose seafood, incorporate more of that into your diet. So some really good resources there as well. So I want to, I don't see any other questions. So I want to thank everybody for being on today. This is our last webinar for Watt, Kansas 2025. We will have some more next year. Also, if you want to look at previous webinars, you can go on to the last, I believe the last 2 years in the newsletter link. There are also the links to the webinars in addition to the newsletters. So just wanted to point that out so you know that there's a lot of other resources. And in your portal, this is from several years ago, there were some of my colleagues and I did the series of med instead of meds. And so we did a Zoom webinar, and you can, it was 6 sessions. So that is something you could access through your Walk Kansas portal. All right, walk to the printer more and park further away at the grocery store and all of those good things. So thank you all. Hope you have a great day. It looks like it's sunny outside. Hope you can get a little bit of activity in today, and all these little tips, all of these little things add up. So have a great afternoon, and we'll close our webinar for today. Thank you.